You know, a couple of days ago where they did that trailer for Flashpoint and sent everyone to a hype and frenzy about who Lazarus might be, and we did the trailer analysis and all that good stuff. Yeah, well, there was some other pretty big news that came out right there and then as well, which I want to talk to you guys about. As you can see from the title, it's Legendary Armour. Legendary Armour is actually coming as a part of episode 5, and that alone is a really big milestone. And so today I wanted to talk a little bit about what the devs announced from it. There's been a lot of discussion going on online, and hopefully bring you guys into the loop if maybe you're not quite sure what all the hubbub's about. So very high level, when Guild Wars 2 released, we had legendary weapons, and it was pretty much the main and only thing to go for. When Heart of Thorns released, they said that they were going to give us more weapons. They said they were going to give us backpacks, which became a thing, and then we got, and then that was kind of last year. And they also said they were going to give us legendary armor. Legendary armor, I don't think, though, any of us was expected to take this long to come into the game. We're well over a year since Heart of Thorns released, well over a year since people bought that expansion. People will have factored the fact that legendary armor is a part of Heart of Thorns into their purchase, and they've been waiting for ages for it. I don't think the devs ever made such a promise, but a lot of people were expecting it to come right at the start of raiding when that was implemented with the Forsaken Thicket way back when. And, well, it just hasn't been a thing until now. So there are a lot of people who, since the Heart of Thorns release, have been salty about legendary armor not being in the game, but also have actually been saving up materials on how to get it. See, the devs did, they were very transparent about all the different things we'd need to acquire this armor. And so if you look online, in fact, I'll leave a link in the description if you guys like to Guild Wars 2 Efficiency, where you can check this out for yourselves. If you look online, you can see what you need to make the legendary armor already, despite the fact that it's not in game. A lot of people have been preparing for it. A lot of people have been excited to see what it looks like, and well, we just found out. So the footage in the background is, by the way, me doing just that, heading back to the Heart of Thorns maps after a long while, getting currency from them, getting shark eggs, stuff like that. It's really nice to have a goal, and it's basically for the ambition of going for legendary armor. Nothing crazy interesting, but hey, if you haven't done a VB meta or a Chuck Garrett or something for a long time, knock yourselves out watching that. So the other important thing, obviously, for us to show off here is what the armor looks like. So let's do exactly that. Before I show you these pictures, let's all calm down and get one thing clear. It's an inevitability that some of you won't like what you're about to see, because they're only doing one set, and there's like no one dream set that is going to appeal to everyone. So if you like really regal, really simplistic designs, if you like really elegant stuff, if you value realism, any of these things which Guild Wars 1 used to cater very heavily to, but Guild Wars 2 doesn't so much. If you really value all of that stuff, you probably aren't gonna like what you're about to see. I saw someone quite funnily call it on Reddit Spike-a-palooza, I think, because there's a hell of a lot of very over-the-top designs and spiky stuff and craziness, essentially, in what we're about to see. So let's do it. Now, first of all, there is the heavy. This is the screenshot that they showed us for the heavy armor. I actually think heavy's probably my favorite of all three. And as you guys know, I'm mostly a light armor player. I sort of main elementalist, but I get a lot of playtime out of my necromancer, and in PvP I get a lot of playtime out of my mesmer. I mostly play light stuff, so light is what I thought I'd prefer for the legendary armors, but heavy, I think the heavy looks really good. And people like this screenshot here because even though it is only a screenshot, we get to see at least that this Char has his tail armored, and that's something that they only ever really put in when they go to a lot more effort. So we've got a very heavily armored Char here with his tail. So heavy armor also has the added benefit of a long time ago now, the devs released a trailer showing what it would look like. Now they confirmed they were never going to do trailers for the other two because it was just going to be too much effort and not necessary. But they did a trailer for the heavy, and for heavy at least we can see that animations are a huge part of this. And so when you look at medium in a second and when you look at light in a second, maybe reserve a little bit of judgment because they might not look too good, but they might have really badass animations. Someone used to joke that the medium should have a trench coat that only appears when you equip your weapons, just to screw people over who don't like trench coats. But yeah, so heavy we've really seen the most of. I think it's pretty nice looking. And with each of these, the devs have also given us a bit of flavor description about what they were going for. So it seems that they had 3 different people do the armors, and I hope that those people had seen what the community was looking for before they just went balls to the wall and made their various sets. But so here, this is from Bojin Shi. who says, this was their description of it, that the heavy armor conveyed images of chivalrous knights, plated iron soldiers of war. With a flash and the flare of winged magic, the armor transforms and is imbued with mystical energy. And so as you can see from the trailer as well, this is kind of like a Transformer style thing. The visor comes down in front of you and stuff, which you can hide, obviously, if you don't like the headpiece. He says, since the heavy armor was our first implementation of this new armor tech, like they built all this back end for legendary armor, the challenge grew quickly beyond making a good looking armor. We also had to figure out how to convey a sense of awe that grows with the armor through its transformation while navigating through the confines of new technical limitations compounded on top of the already existing ones. The way the devs talk about this armor is like it was a nightmare to make, and while that might serve as a really good justification for why it's taken so long if you believe them at face value, it also worries the crap out of me when it comes to future expansions and World vs. World getting their own legendary armor and PvP players getting their own legendary armor. Have the devs learned any lessons from this original grouping? I'd like to hear that they have, and that maybe the future doesn't look so bleak, right? So anyway, there you go, that's heavy. Now let's move on to medium. All right, I'll just give you the screenshot. Here we go. The screenshot itself, I've got to be honest, one of the reasons I like this more than any other is it reminds me of very early, like 2010 content that the devs used to put out, like skill videos, because you get Kreiter back there and they've got that depth of field on there. It feels like a really, really old, like early Guild Wars 2 hype screenshot to me. As for the armor itself, I really don't play much medium stuff. The most medium I play is, well, I play a reasonable amount, but it's like on Thief, and this doesn't look very thiefy to me, and it's on Engineer, and this doesn't look very engineery to me. Neither does it really even look that rangery to me. Obviously, there's a big question of dye channels, right? And I think that one of the biggest things as well, if we're not even talking about animations that will either make or break this armor, is how well they can be dyed. I almost feel like one thing that they could have done to make the legendary armor even cooler is give it even more dye channels than all the other armors in the game. Like if you've got 6 dye channels instead of just 4, that would have, you know, made a lot of people wet themselves. But there's been no word that the devs have done that, so maybe they missed out. A lot of people don't like this armor one, this medium armor one, because again, it's a trench coat, and the devs have done a lot of trench coats. Maybe they just decided, look, we want the first of the legendary armors to be sort of typify the whole category, and so there's loads of trench coats. So obviously the legendary armor needs to be the best version of a trench coat you can ever do. But I don't know, man. Their description is medium armor is crafting from a collection of the finest bones of legendary foes. These special bones hold magical powers that are channeled through the armor, culminating in a surge of mystical energy. There's that term mystical energy twice there. When the transformation is complete, excess energy is expelled from the Wyvern skulls. And there's all this like description here of the Wyverns. Obviously we know how the collections and stuff work, and this doesn't require us to go kill Wyverns specifically. Maybe this is some very early ideas back when they weren't quite sure how they were going to implement it. Maybe legendary armors back then were envisioned to be a bit like the precursor scavenger hunts or the Heart of Thorns first 4 legendaries. Anyway, so that's from Lorraine Howard III? Really? She's Lorraine Howard III? Is that right? So there you go, that's medium. And then lastly, light. Now, light is what I'm most interested in. Again, here's a screenshot. Again, we don't know how it'll be dyed. Again, we don't know what the animations look like. And all that stuff's going to be pretty important. The background on this one doesn't even look that great. For me, the way that light looks, the main thing that disappoints me is it reminds me too much of an outfit I already have that has some floating crystals that move around it. Like, it looks a lot like an outfit. And I guess in some respects that was inevitable. Obviously, the devs have been going balls to the wall with the outfits because they want you to buy them, so they make them look as good as possible. It's just another example of how outfits kind of tarnish the game. And in a lot of respects, legendary armor are a really weird thing for Guild Wars 2 to go into, because they're kind of like saying, this is the best armor, you should wear this and show this off to everyone for prestige, and then sort of undercut all the other armors in the game and other outfits and incentive for people to use the gem store and play Fashion Wars 2. It's a weird concept. Like, top level, thinking about Heart of Thorns, putting legendary armor in the game, seems a little mismatched on some levels. But nonetheless, I think this is the one I'll be going for. I think you're going to be seeing a lot of coverage of mine with legendary armor. It might be light armor you see more than anything else, just because those are the main characters I play, and I do have a lot of stuff ready to go to craft it. But I just hope that the animations are a lot better. You guys know me, I'm not great at Fashion Wars 2, so really, I'm not even that passionate about a lot of the way this stuff looks. But yeah, this will probably be what I go for, just for the prestige. The description is, the light armor is based on mystical energy of crystals. It's surrounded by crystal energy and holds magical power within. When entering combat, the crystal energy is released to transform the armor into its combat form. So what are we looking at there? Because she's got her staff out, right? Is that the combat form or the non-combat form? The energy is distributed among crystal spikes, manifesting as an electrical aura. The armor transformation was a huge challenge, but the result is quite satisfying. That's from Mia Kim. And that same question goes for the medium as well. Is that the combat form or the non-combat form? And, you know, I do believe there is such a thing as overly flashy, but again, this is just like why one screenshot doesn't really do it justice. In a lot of ways, this is a very weird blog post for them to put out. It almost would have been better, just so that they didn't have too much scrutiny going on these couple of images, it almost would have been better to just randomly surprise people with the fact legendary armor was getting dumped in. Yes, they would have ran the risk of leaks, which seemed to be a bit of a problem with Guild Wars 2 over the past year and a half, but at least they would have avoided some of the maybe backlash that they got or extra scrutiny that they got just because they're only showing off this one configuration in these 2 screenshots here. Heavy armor, of course, escaping a little bit because it had the video before. So that's the way it looks. I really, even though I've opened the video with this, and even though that's 99% of all anyone wants to say on the whole goddamn internet, I really don't want to talk about the aesthetics too much, but the other thing that they announced in this blog post, which I think is really cool, and I'm very curious about what you guys think about this. Now, this is more to do with the gameplay. So they have a little section talking about how runes will work with legendary armor. So backing up a little bit, when you look at legendary weapons, they look cool, but they also allow you to stat swap. Now, that's a big perk. That originally was just like an added bonus, but these days there are a lot of players who only like legendary weapons because of that gameplay function, especially the way that build diversity was pushed by Heart of Thorns, and you know, there's more challenging stuff that makes you think about your builds more as well in PvE these days. That stat swapping thing for a lot of people is the main event now, which is kind of funny. But the one thing legendary armors don't let you do is swap sigils. So sometimes you can get away with swapping the stats but not the sigil, and it's alright. But quite often if you swap the stats of a legendary weapon, you might also then be spending a lot of money to replace the sigils that's in it, or spending gems to extract the sigil to then put a new one in to then swap again. It's just fiddly, right? And it's been fiddly for a long time. That's even worse, right? While we may say it's acceptable for legendary weapons and this feeds into the economy and stuff and keeps a sink for sigils, because sigils essentially continually getting destroyed, right? While we can say that for the sigils and the weapons, where you only have a max of 4 in a single build, it's way worse for armor, because armor, you have tons of runes, and runes also have much more prominent effect and tend to be much more hooked into builds, I find. So it's even rarer that you'll want to stat swap your armor, because then you're going to have to probably change all the runes on it as well, and it's the price of not just a couple of runes, it's 6 runes, and if they're meta builds then they're really expensive, and it's just fiddly, right? So with the legendary armor, I think we were all expecting to be able to stat select, right? But the question was, will ArenaNet go to the lengths of changing the way that runes work in it too? You know, maybe let us stat select runes as well. Well, they did do something, and I think that's really cool, because I actually wasn't anticipating anything. Maybe my bar of expectations a little bit low these days, but I really thought they'd just put it out there. I thought they'd be happy to just let the economy continue to have rune sinks like this and continue viewing the stat swapping as just a minor perk rather than the main event. But no, they did something. So it's not that we'll be right-clicking and going into a drop-down box. I think that that was always a really unrealistic expectation if ever people were suggesting it, because with the rate that they add new runes to the game and the places that they add them and the way that the back-end tech probably works to update those lists, it just would probably be a nightmare. And eventually, as a player, you'd be scrolling through tons of stuff. This isn't like in PvP where you can click a little cog and categorize for power and condi and blah, 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 blah. You just have a jumbled mess of a list, and right-clicking and scrolling all the way through this list, this long list that's only ever going to get longer, to then click that one rune and then doing it again and again and again, actually, first of all, is really kind of messy to implement, but B, isn't even that useful. People think that a drop-down box for runes would be super useful. I disagree. I don't think that was ever really the best solution. So the devs did do something, though, and it wasn't something I'd ever even thought of, and I think it's quite smart. So what they did was they said that if you have a piece of armor, a legendary armor, and it's got a monk rune in it, and you now want to put in a rune of water, you want to have a slightly different healing build, right? And you slot a rune of water in over the top. For regular armor, when you put that rune of water in, the monk rune that's underneath it gets deleted. For legendary armor, it doesn't get deleted. It gets thrown back into your inventory. Simple as that. Okay, so if for a much more common experience for people, let's say you're a warrior, you love meaty warrior power builds, you've been running around with Scholar in the open world, but now people want you to run strength runes, right? For every strength rune you apply on, your scholars will pop back into your inventory, so they won't be deleted, so you don't have to buy more from the TP. And this actually has a good amount of quality of life on there too, because essentially what it means, the way your inventory will look in the future, if you have legendary armor, is going to be very different for the Face of Guild Wars 2 than it's been for the first 5 years of its existence. So right now, I might have like 6 slots in my inventory for one armor set, and then 6 for another, and then 6 for another. And I've got like 18 slots being used up all down there. Well, now instead of those 6 for a single alternate build, I can actually just have 1 slot in my inventory with runes, because runes stack. So I can have 6 runes. So I can have runes stacking up in my inventory instead of armor. And that's awesome. It's really cool. It means you can have 6 full builds just at the bottom with different runes. So you get 6 slots each with 6 runes in it, for example, right? And that would be 6 different builds you can run just by double clicking. Now, a friend of mine mentioned, and I think this would be really cool, another quality of life update that would be really useful for Guild Wars 2 going forwards is for runes to have a right-click equip all. Now, if they did that as well at some point in the future, they don't have to come together, but if they did them both, it would be amazing. You just right-click, equip all runes, and boom, it's swapped. That would be so awesome. So I'm really happy with this. And this isn't just a perk when it comes to people who want to swap their stats and then feel gimped because they have to swap their runes too. It's actually a perk a lot beyond that. Like, so let me give you an example. I love playing support Tempest in Fractals. And so I might only stick on Magi's as my, stat allocation, right? I like Magi's and I don't want to change Magi's, but maybe I'm trying to figure out what feels more fun. Is it Monk runes where I get more raw healing, or is maybe Radiance runes, which plays into auras more, so I can hold chilling aura on people for longer and I can put retaliation on people and stuff. And so in the past, if I ever wanted to do this, I'd have to delete the old runes, and then I'd have to go run more Ascalon Catacombs to replace them again, and then I'd have to craft more Radiance runes, and then if I didn't like it, I'd have to go back to Ascalon Catacombs, and blah, 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 blah. This has got nothing to do with me stat swapping the legendary armor. It's just an amazing upgrade anyway, and that's true for so many different areas. Nightmare runes versus Thorn runes, Flame Legion runes versus Scholar runes. If you're raiding and for example, and you find out that you're constantly on really low health, run Flame Legion runes instead without having to delete your Scholar. It's awesome. So I'm really happy with this. The big question on everyone's mind, of course, now as well is, hey, are we going to be seeing this for legendary weapons too? Legendary weapons might be a little bit different in the devs' eyes because there are less sigils that you run on a single build, and maybe they do want to continue that to be a big part of the trading post and not devalue all the sigils. I don't really know. It would be nice, and I think a significant chunk of us are anticipating that sigils might get that exact same quality of life too, but you'd expect them to say that on the blog post, no, and they kind of didn't in the end. I'm also kind of curious, because runes especially are going to be exotic that we're wearing at endgame, does that mean that now we can have in our inventories those exotic gear sorting bags? And what this would mean is that our runes don't just magically pop back in our inventory, but they also go nice and neat into a specific area. That would be really cool as well. So yeah, there's a lot going on basically. That's legendary armor. Do expect when Flashpoint comes out to be seeing a lot of stuff, me running around in it, showing you guys what it looks like. I'll try and get some different die configurations and stuff. I might even do a video of me crafting my first set. In a way, this has kind of built some hype and generated something that we haven't experienced since when 2012 first came out. And people were going for legendary weapons. This is a whole new category, a whole new type of loot, a whole new area of endgame for people to go through. And I think that's really fun, because legendary backpacks, while they were also a part of Hearthorns, kind of fell a bit limp to me in the end. And that's about it. Remains to be seen how good looking this stuff will be once all the animations are in there. Love to see what you guys say, but please don't just scream at me how much you hate the armor. I've heard it already. It doesn't add enough. Let's talk about the other interesting aspects of this. When do you guys want to see more legendary armor? How on the out do you feel right now if you haven't been raiding, which is of course where this comes from? Let's talk about that kind of stuff. But in any case, thanks very much for watching, guys. If you've been keeping up with my review, I have a little discussion on this there also, and it's actually finished now. Thanks for all the support over that time, guys, and I guess for now I'll be running on into Flashpoint itself to see what the patch looks like. Cheers, guys, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.